So I'm just going to give you a brief background about myself. And yes, it's my 40th year in IT. I did a presentation in India. It wasn't called IT then. It was called DP, data processing. So yeah, this is a long time. And so as you see when I come through this presentation, I'm being quite reflective and retrospective over these 40 years. So you can imagine in 40 years I've lived through many technology eras. As just a graphic. My children think that I was born in the Jurassic period. But yeah, you can imagine technology has changed significantly in that time, so I've seen a lot of change. And but I'm still trying to stay relevant. I do a lot of things outside of software testing as well, and that's quite important in the context of this presentation. And so, just to give you a little bit of idea about me, I like coming up with ideas. I have formed many businesses in 40 years and done many things, and there are a few people in the audience, friends and colleagues who know me, and I'm still trying to do that. I still like to give presentations. That was me in Australia, the ANZTV, ISTQB conference. So I'm still trying to talk. I'm very interested in a strange game that we play in England called cricket. More of that in a minute, but that was me on a tour in Barbados many years ago. Another talk, this was me in India in February, doing a talk to IT and engineering undergraduates, 19, 20-year-olds. And I had the best question. I had several very, very good questions in that audience, so I hope I will get some good questions today. The best question was, what was IT like 40 years ago? I just try and play a little bit of saxophone and sing occasionally. But this is the big thing. I'm trying to write a book. 40 years, and I've written papers, I've done presentations, but I've never written a book. So that sort of leads on to with what this presentation is about. So, look, just a little bit more about me. I have created a tool many, many years ago, but it's still on the market, test management called T-Plan. Been a businessman for many, many years, but I like to think I'm creative and I'm an innovator. I'm the UK representative for ISTQB. And I noticed some people have the advanced certificate. I'm the chairman of the working group that produces the syllabus. I'm also a member of, has anyone here heard of CAT, Certified Agile Tester? I'm a founder member of the Specialist Interest Group. We had a meeting in Berlin on Monday. An R&D project around practical assessments. In sport, I'm involved in a venture that's bringing digital marketing into certainly the world of cricket. And I do, in my spare time, I'm on the board of one of our professional cricket clubs in England, my county, called Essex. And I'm writing a book. So, the background to this is that all these things I've been involved in over the years, so with IT projects, other business ventures, sport, I've seen so many projects that are going wrong and they're out of control. They're either late, they cost too much money, or they get scrapped. How many people here have worked on a failed project? Yeah, quite a few. Not as many as I thought. Maybe things are better in Russia. So, you know, and by failed, you know, it could be all sorts of, you know, just being late. And I've sort of looked and seen a lot of common faults. But this presentation is not just, although it will look at other things outside of IT to draw on the subject, it's still going to focus on software testing. And it's focused on software testing as a form of measurement. So I'll come on to that more later. But as I said, I use analogies and common characteristics across other things to help build the picture. quite a few examples, particularly at the end. I've shown a number of examples and experiences that help highlight the points I'm trying to make in the presentation. So, not just in terms of business and projects failing or going wrong, I have concerns over the effectiveness of software testing as a measurement process. So that's a real key part to my talk. So I question even some fundamental concepts of software testing and test cases and how people's view of a test case and how they use them. So my book is actually called Measurement and Testing. Well, it will be when I finish it, which may be a long time still. And I have this theme, overall theme for the book, which, if you want control of anything, not just an IT project, but anything, then you need an effective measurement and testing system. Okay, so not just testing, but measurement and testing. So hopefully I will explain what I mean. And this is the first saying, testing is more than testing. How many people here think the definition of testing is to find bugs? Nobody. Wonderful. I don't know what I'm doing here then. Or maybe one of the key aspects of testing. Okay. Testing means many things to many people, not just within IT but outside of IT. And so that's I'm not going into any more detail here about that. But one of my, let's call it axiom, a word you understand, axiom or saying, yes, I think software testing can learn a lot from other forms of measurement and testing outside of IT. I also think that other forms of measurement and testing outside of IT can learn a lot from software testers. We have a lot of skills, we have a lot of techniques that maybe can be applied in other fields. Because I know, because I've used them, and I will give you some examples later. The good thing about agile development, who's working on agile projects? Yeah, many. Agile development is really helping the cause for some of my arguments for measurement and testing. It's been great because probably a long time ago, I've been working in testing for 30 years. I had a lot of the similar ideas that I still have today. But actually a lot of people didn't have them. But Agile is really helping to make people much more aware. And I'll just put a slightly controversial statement here. I have a bit of a problem with test cases and how people's obsession with test cases. I know that everybody needs test cases to test. It's, without going into the detail here, how people use them, or how people have seen people use them, give problems. So, just one other axiom I have. I use just, this is just a funny thing I put up here. Does anyone know this question? Good, yeah, so the answer is 42. Actually, Douglas Adams, the author, he lived down the road from me, which is a school down the road. But, that's another story. The answer to any question about software testing. Does anyone know the answer? It's not 43. It depends. And there's I don't know if anyone's ever heard, there's a guy called Dale Perry from the US. He works for SQE, Software Quality Engineering. They put on the STAR conferences in the US. And just to show you how long ago I've been involved, I was the speaker at the very first STAR conference in Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, 1992. I didn't see a lot of conferences. So, right, let's move on now from all of that background to sort of start to analyse a little bit about what I mean by three words really here. Control, measurement and testing, because these are all wrapped into the theme, and testing and software testing. So I'm just going to start looking at control, because I find that a lot of people find it difficult to distinguish what do I mean by control, what do I mean by management. Are they one and the same? Are they different? And so I think I'm trying to explain what I mean by control. So by control, well, just maybe a couple of two definitions, if they make sense. I've introduced a little term here called lead and lag. I'll probably explain more about that in further slides. But does anyone think here that control and management mean exactly the same thing? Good. I hear some great answers. I'm going to come to Russia again. Okay, good. Well, that's going to make my life a lot easier as well. But I mean, I do have a problem with the definition of control. I'm going to give you some examples of that I think help make the point, and also help make some yeah. Let's move on to this. So I look at there's a definition of corporate governance from the OECD from many years ago that I like to use, and the second point here in corporate governance says it should be 1, 2. It's a version problem with PowerPoint. Effective monitoring and control of the management of the business. In other words, governance viewpoint, if you want to control your from the viewpoint of being a governor or on a board of directors, you have to have a system in place, a framework in place that allows you to effectively monitor and control management. So you're not actually managing, but you have to control and steer. So just like that as a definition to help draw the distinction. And what I'm now going to do is just come on to one of my favourite subjects to help give you an analogy about a control system and a measurement framework. And I'm going to use an example of a cruise ship, just any ship. And the reason I'm doing this, partly because I love cruising, some friends here know how much I like cruising. Recently in March we had a ISTQB meeting in Singapore, and some people here were at. Rather than fly home, I decided to fly to China and get a ship home. So my cruise is 4 to 6 days. Hopefully I'm going to try and finish my book, but there are too many other distractions. So, in terms of this is an analogy. It's not the same as an IT project, but hopefully you'll see how I get some points on this. So, being in control. I'll just put all these things up. If I want to control something, you need to answer some questions. What are my measures of success? Very important. How will I know when I've met them? How sure I'm at any point in time in my journey or my project will I know that I'm going to meet them? How do I know where I am against them, where my progress at any point in time? Can I manage my change effectively at any point in time? And lastly, back to my test cases. For an IT project, how useful are test cases to keep me in control of the project? So, another question to you here is how, in terms of project control, how many people see, or how many people think test cases are a very important part of keeping control of an IT project? Good. Yeah. I was hoping there'd be some hands go up there. And yes, I think, well, they should be. I see a lot of the time that they are either not used very well or they're not useful enough to help you keep in control. So, if I draw an analogy, let's use my cruise journey rather than an IT project. I've thought quite a bit about this and spoken to some people in cruising and saying, okay, if I'm on a journey from, where I went to China, back to England, what are my successful outcomes for that journey? Well, I obviously want to reach my destination. I want to get there on time. I want all my passengers and crew to be safe. within budget. I need to avoid obstacles, things like icebergs and things. So I look at those outcomes for my journey on a ship, and I think, hey, there's some similar things to an IT project. You're on a journey, as an analogy, you can, for example, that's a quality attribute. Messages of CC. So they're my outcomes. So one of my questions that I said to be in control is, how will I know when I've met those targets? Well, it's fairly obvious that when I've reached the destination, I'm there, and so that's obvious. But what are the key measures and targets that I need to be able to monitor and control during my journey that I'm going to reach my destination? So, some key measures: speed, my direction, my position at any point in time, probably a series of quality attributes as well. So I'm just taking a few examples here. And I'll put them in a little diagram for you. So my outcomes that I described earlier, I think there's more than this, but there are 4 key measures that I need to be able to be in control of at any point in time in my journey to be able to meet those outcomes. And so within those key measures, I may have got some targets that I need to reach. So for example, I need a journey to make sure I get there on time, I have a distance to cover, I have an average speed to maintain. I may have got a maximum speed that I can go as well. As a quality attribute, I have no complaints. I don't have any complaints from my customers. Just a few ideas of some targets within those measures that I may need to try and reach. Within those, I now then look at that and I take initiatives based on those key goals and those performance drivers. Does that make sense? Got that? At this point, I will say part of the reason I'm doing this as well is because over the years, when I've tried to make some points about testing, people have said to me, they've described a model to me that I don't agree with. And when I've tried to explain my model, they said it's too complex, far too complex, and you need a simple example to describe it. When you use a simple example for anything, it quite often means you can't get your points across about complexity. So this is why I'm using this scenario, so hopefully everyone can visualize this. So I have some other measures now. So I've listed my key measures that I think I need to keep control. But there's a whole series of other measures that I need to be able to monitor those key measures. So for example, this is very important when you're on a ship. Has anyone been on a cruise before? Well, so you will obviously know, if you have been, the weather is very important. So you have the swell of the waves, wind, currents. There are many different measures that you need to be able to manage. And there are various other constraints that you're looking at: fuel, safety, comfort, obstacles. There's some fixed obstacles, there's some variable obstacles you may meet on the way. There's many, many other ones as well. The whole idea of this is just to show you that, for me to maintain my key measures that I described earlier, there are lots of other measures underneath there, and I've probably got a lot of management systems that are actually being used to give me this information. Okay. So if I plug these into my model, if I look, oops. So I've now put in underneath one of my key targets, which is my average speed. There's a whole load of supporting measures within there that I need to be able to manage and monitor, to be able to make sure that I'm going to actually keep an average speed up. It will actually help me meet one of the key objectives without So in other words, what you see here is a kind of, you can probably visualize, these are just some examples, that you end up building quite a complex framework to be able to manage and measure where you are at any point in time, and be fairly sure that you are on course, fairly sure that you know where you are at any point in time, that you can manage the obstacles, all of the key questions that you have to answer to be in control. So, I've just did a very, very simple visual just to show you the complexity. So, for example, some of these weather indicators here may be used to feed into node speed and direction, and some of these obstacles also direction, position. There's a whole complex mapping between my detailed measures of management systems and my key measures at the top. Does that make sense? So there isn't a direct necessarily relationship between any key measure and just a hierarchical relationship between the sub-measures. That's the key point I'm trying to get over, that you quite often need a complex system to control. So, I'm just going to do a few slides now, which is using the same terminology, but I think also helps to make some of the points I'm going to make in a minute on software testing. I will get to software testing in a minute. Don't worry. Business performance measurement and management. Everybody here who has KPIs? KPIs, who has scorecards? Everybody here is probably, if you work for some company, you're driven by performance targets. I was been around a very long time, as you know, 40 years. So I was around when some of these principles were coming in, first of all. And has anyone heard of Kaplan and Norton? Business balance scorecards. These were the guys that wrote the definitive book on business performance measurement and management. And I will use some examples from there because I think once again it helps make some points. So, one of the key points about scorecards is your driving behaviour. So we're setting targets, hopefully good ones, to drive the right behaviour for your company. You're able to measure outcomes. And crucially, it links your actions to your overall business strategy. So effectively it builds a framework for you. So there are very similar principles in this to what I was talking about with my ship. So it leads to predictable outcomes. The whole idea is that business create a strategy, set a series of measures and targets, drive some initiatives, link them all together and make sure that you provide the feedback so your business is successful. There is a very good book, very small book, if anybody wants to read this. I've given some references in my talk here. But this is a very important point from this book. Measures that are badly constructed destroy organisations' performance. So has anyone here experienced bad performance measures that they've been given? And they think they're very bad, they've led them to doing the wrong things? Yes, some of those waving very much over there. So, it's a very powerful mechanism, but it's also very dangerous because if you don't set the right measures and targets, you don't have an outcome. So, it's just a really good point, a really good book. So, there are 5 generic or key principles of the scorecards. There's a generic this can be used. This is one of the things I started looking at maybe 25 years ago when I first looked at these systems, saying, hey, this isn't just a business. You can apply some of these same principles to IT projects. And actually, if you look at the software testing process, start thinking from a performance measurement viewpoint and use the analogy, it may help you to do software testing better. It also may other really important point to remember is that these performance measurement system, scorecards, cascade. So one person's how becomes somebody else's what. And the other thing, if you remember I mentioned earlier, lag and lead indicators. So there are some indicators or measures that could be considered to be goals you're trying to reach, and they are reactive. So, for example, when I arrived in Southampton, in England, for my cruise, I'd already reached it. I was there, and so I can't do anything about it once I'm there. I can only measure it once I'm there. So it's a reactive indicator. A performance indicator is predictive, so it's something that drives behaviour. So, for example, in a business, maybe where you're doing sales, you have performance targets. Number of clients, number of leads, sales targets, things you're trying to reach, so they're predictive. So it's really important to think of lag and lead when you're setting the measures. And here's just a very small, I'm not going to spend too long on this. There is a paper which I will make available to you, which explains, it's called the Keystone Entity. I mentioned objectives, why you're doing something, measures and targets you set to reach those, which is the what I need to do, and the initiatives are the how I'm going to do them. In a scorecard, it's not the greatest diagram yet, but the whole idea is that I mentioned before, one person's how becomes someone else's what, and so on, and you have these cascading scorecards. And once again, you can probably see that these could be quite a simple hierarchy, or they could be linked together in many different complex ways, because there could be, for one target, there could be many initiatives that you need to do, each of which can be broken down further into more measures, more target, more initiatives. One initiative could be put into place that could satisfy more than one target. So it becomes quite a complex, and you end up building things called strategy maps. That's just to make a few points. So, just reiterate a few points. If I want to have an effective outcome-driven model, I need to separate the what from the how. There could be complex relationships involved. I need information traceability from the top to the bottom. I can then control complex organisations and systems. And I strongly believe there's a very good fit with agile, test-driven principles. At last, I'm on software testing. So, let's look at software testing. So, what are the measures and targets that support the software testing process? Are they test cases? Someone shaking their head, good. Objectives, requirements. In fact, if you look at the latest glossary in ISTQB, those say test objectives, test requirements, something like the same. I think I'm right to test conditions. Question for you: who here uses test conditions? Excellent. My Skype address is called test conditions. So you probably understand that I'm a big fan of test conditions. What about the test requirements or test objectives? Do people use those terms? Therein actually lies one of the problems of testing, is that there are still too many terms, and some terms are equivalent. So it depends whatever you're doing. Testers focus on test cases, but are they the best measures and or targets to drive behaviour? Some questions to think about. The test case is the best to manage risk and change. So the test cases, good measure. Remember all these sayings I had at the start of the month. If you can be in control, all you needed to know where you are at any point in time, confidence you're going to reach your outcomes. Are test cases my best measure to do? So, I'm going to list some of the problems that I see with test cases and the way that people often build them and the systems that they use to manage progress with test cases. So, apologies for being very basic. I'm going to look at some definitions of testing just to help get the idea. So I just looked at this interesting. Remember I said earlier, testing is more than testing. This is just a generic definition of test. You can probably see that. Those of you who understand English. So, let me say, the means by which the presence or quality or genuineness of anything is determined by means of trial. I would generally say that's a lag measure. It's normally you're measuring it once you've seen the thing. This is a definition of software testing. Software testing is the process of executing a program or application with the intent of finding software bugs. Now, the ISTQB, who most of you have heard of, the first syllabus that came out, the foundation syllabus, came out in England. It was called the ISEP, Foundation Certificate in Software Testing, in 1996. The definition of testing in that syllabus stopped there. It said that the purpose of software testing is to find bugs. When I asked the question up front, fortunately, nobody said that was just the definition of testing. But that was what the world was taught in the first foundation syllabus. And that's why I got quite angry, because I'd already been testing for many, many years, and I saw that statement in the foundation syllabus. Well, that's wrong. That's not why I test. Yes, it's one of the reasons maybe, and it might depend on the level of testing you are doing. Are you doing unit testing? Are you doing acceptance testing? Maybe a very different view. And the interesting thing is that the first foundation syllabus was based on a component testing standard, so a unit testing standard. And that's possibly why this statement was there. The second one, the rest of this definition, it could also be stated as the process of validation and verifying that a software program application or product meets the business and technical requirements. And I think probably everyone in here would agree that's quite a good definition of testing. Yeah? Which is great. I have another one which I really like, because to me, a much simpler definition of thinking of it. I've always taught for many, many years that testing is a risk reduction process. So, if you have no risk, why are you doing any testing? Arguably, you don't need to test if there is no risk. So actually, you start with your risks, and you test according to those. And you reduce those risks to that point where they're no longer a risk. How am I doing on time? Sorry? Is that all? Oh. Okay. I'm going to go very quickly then. We started late, didn't we? Okay. I won't go into all the problems with test case. I've already explained some of them. But one of the problems with test case, I see people are trying to do too much with the test case. Yeah? So people are, if you look at all this is from ISTQB glossary, there are all different types of test cases. Some of these I would call just partially completed test cases. Some people just put too much into them. So, I never know with testing. I had a project that I worked on, very senior person took me to lunch because I had experience working with the Bank of England and they were being regulated by them. Said, hey Mike, I have a project. We have 10,000 test cases. Based on your experience, is that the right number? So I just, when I fell off my chair laughing, I said, why are you measuring that? How big is your test? How big is it? What is a test case? What are you putting into it? It's crazy, yeah? But this was a very senior person overall regarding this project. So, what I find is that, I did miss the definition of a test case, but the test case, to me, a lot of people put the what and the how they're trying to test into a test case. And that means that's why you end up with a definition saying, my test case could have everything in it. So when it's only got this in it, I'm going to call it a logical test case or a concrete test case. When I've added my data into it, the more you put in, you're restricting yourself in terms of being able to manage. The other problem I have is that people work in hierarchies. People only think in hierarchies. So, the world is complex. It's a complex relational world. When I want to manage my ship, the world is not simple. If you think in hierarchies, you have a real problem. So a simple world became a very complex world many years ago. Many relational databases were built many years ago. Right, just trying to do a few examples because I don't have too long to go. This was an actual diagram from a failed project. And this failed project cost nearly 100 million euros. Huge European financial system. And these, do you understand what these mean? Yeah? This is a one-to-many relationship. This was their actual model. So they said, we're going to break our requirement into lots of these test requirements. Each one of those will have one or many design specifics. Each one of those have many test cases. Yeah? And they just built this huge hierarchy. Time is up. What time is up? Oh, 1 minute then. Right. Just for, if I plug my testing into this framework, it becomes, you guys start to see how complex your test cases down here need a complex measurement and management system. You need to separate out, when you're in test conditions or requirements, setting those correctly. It's not easy. It's not easy to set good measures and targets. There's plenty more to say, but I run out of time, unfortunately. So, but hopefully everybody will be able to get a copy of this. Let me just leave you with this then. The better model means you need to separate the what from the how. You need these complex relationships. The test conditions can be considered as targets for success, organized by your measurement attributes, which can be a mix of functional or behavioral things. Okay. A lot of people I see use test conditions more as a hierarchy, a high-level test condition in their main cases. That's not a good way to do it. Yeah, you need to really think what are your key measures for success, just like the journey on the ship. Then define the targets in terms of your test conditions or requirements. Then build your test cases and link your test cases to those. So you're not just linking cases back to your requirements, you're linking them through a complex measurement framework. That's my message. I had a few other things to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.